Good afternoon. Thanks, Tanya, and thank you all for joining us. And Tim, a very special welcome to you from Toronto. For the past, as Tanya mentioned, for the past 4 years, we have worked with an amazing group of partners to socialize the idea of social procurement and community benefits programs. And yesterday, as Tanya mentioned, we had a very important discussion with the Executive Policy Committee of the City of Winnipeg's City Council. For the first time in our history in this city, there was a motion before EPC to adopt a community benefits framework for Winnipeg. It's been long awaited conversation, and it was a good start, but there is work to be done. This is a work in progress. There is a long road ahead, but we are heartened that the first steps have been taken. Now, just briefly, during these past 4 years, one thing has stood out. Very often our discussions and our decision makers and industry representatives have viewed and expressed ideas about community benefits as a higher cost proposition. And it seldom has the idea of an investment through community benefits been seen as an idea with significant tangible and intangible returns. That this initiative would have a very beneficial profile to all elements of both business and the social objectives and outcomes that we all hope for as citizens. The comments that I've heard along the way are, this will drive costs up. This will lead into my already thin margins. That's commonly an industry refrain. I don't want to have to pay more. That's politicians often talking about community benefits resulting in higher costs. CBAs will mean we can't afford to build as much because we're paying more for each individual projects. Now, seeing CBA initiatives as a cost and not an investment both by business and government has been and remains one of our most significant challenges. We've been waiting on industry to lead on community benefits. And when dealing with change, look, we understand we're a business organization, and when there is significant change, there is a natural and understandable reluctance to change how we've been doing business, how we've come to understand our industry and our domain. And especially when there's any degree of debate or uncertainty about the cost-benefit equation, business can be hesitant to join in. So it takes a long time to design and refine a business process. And Tim, for you today, we have a diverse audience, and I want to thank you for what you're about to share with us. We have always known that CBAs are good economic policy, and there's untapped opportunity for business. And early adopters tend to gain a competitive advantage in initiatives like this. And your experience proves that fact. I look forward to hearing how CBAs have impacted your bottom line and how the place you call home has become a better place for your fellow citizens through CBAs. Thank you.
Here. I'm just going to do brief introductions for the reason we're all here. We're going to bring on Tim Coldwell. He's a husband, dad, and Mohawk entrepreneur focused on leading by serving culture and the monetization of ideas. He's the current president of Chandos, the largest B-Corp certified contractor in the world, and a national technical builder leading change in the Canadian construction industry. Under Tim's leadership, Chandos has forged partnerships with social enterprises across Canada, focusing on employment of at-risk youth and those who are underrepresented in the construction industry. So thank you for joining us, Tim, and I'll leave it with you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, and I'm honored to be here. I'm just going to get my slides up. We had this in the dry run earlier. I got to wind it back to the front. Here we go. So what I want to do is I'm going to speak for about 35 minutes. And what I would like to do is I'll tell you a little bit about Chandos, a little bit about myself. I've got a personal connection to social procurement and how it gets expressed in CBAs. And then I want to dig into the business case for why this makes sense and why this is good for general contractors, why this is good for municipalities, why this is good for subcontractors, why this is good for trades unions. I think when the understanding of the business case is often misunderstood in Canada. So that's kind of the process I'd like to go through. And just to start with Chandos, I think the best place to start would be for me to say, I don't know where I would be today if Chandos didn't give me a chance. I've been with the organization for 20 years, and I was started when I was like 17, turning 18, and I didn't have the best grades. I didn't have the best experience. And there's a long story around kind of my younger days, but Chandos took a chance on me, and they gave me a job when I was 17. And I don't know where I would be. And when I got that job, I was given a second family, a sense of purpose, and a deep personal connection to the company. And it's driven me over the years. I'm going to just step through why brand matters. And really this conversation is around purpose and the idea of purpose-driven organizations in the Canadian construction industry. It's not just in the construction industry, it's a more broad conversation and business as a whole. And when I first saw these stats, I was really amazed. So 89% of customers are loyal to brands that share their personal values. So if you want to create differentiation as a business person, you need to talk about your values and what you stand for. The next stat is mind-boggling to me. 92% of employees would change jobs to work for a company that shares their values. And, you know, that's all things being equal, you know, kind of same commute, same compensation, but 92% would quit their job today and walk across the street to work for an organization that they felt had a better connection to their personal values. 87% of employees do not feel a sense of purpose in their day-to-day work. And so the inverse of that is a way of thinking about this is only 13% of people really love their job. And what if we as business leaders could move that from 13% to 23% to 33% to 53%? What impact would that have in the organization in terms of productivity and ultimately profitability? Just from a demographic standpoint, 64% of those born between 1980 and 1995 will not take a job unless the employer is socially responsible. And 85% of those born between 95 and 2010 believe companies have a moral obligation to solve social issues. I'll say that again, a moral obligation to solve social issues. And it's all too common for business leaders and companies to sit back and try to be agnostic on the issues of the day. But if you want to talk about being a purpose-driven organization, you certainly cannot do that. You know, here's a picture of Rosa Parks on the bus back in the day. And I'm going to play a very short video here from Bill George. Bill George was the CEO of Medtronics. He's well known for writing a book called True North. And it's this idea around authentic leadership. And here's a clip of him talking about purpose and how business leaders need to stand up for the values of their organization.
There's a big change taking place in CEOs today because they have the courage to stand up for what they believe in and be outspoken about. There was a time when everyone kind of hunched down and didn't hunker down and didn't want to say anything and go below the radar screen. Now I think they feel it's so purposeful. Let me give you an example of someone who did that. Ken Frazier, CEO of Merck, was so offended by President Trump's comments after Charlottesville that he resigned from his council. And he now didn't do it quietly, he put out a statement. And you realize that everything Merck does, their whole purpose is often dependent on approvals from the US government for every new drug, quality, pricing. And so it is an example of extreme moral courage. But I think more and more CEOs are having the courage to find their voice and stand up for what they believe in. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, stands up and says he will not accept what's going on in Indiana or North Carolina with discrimination against people that are LGBTQ. And so he has that courage to find his voice. Mark Benioff, the same way, of Salesforce. And I have such admiration. If your company has a purpose, you've got to stand up and be counted. You've got to say, this is wrong. And so I think you have to find your voice and have that courage. Do the right thing. Do you take a risk? Absolutely. But if you don't, the greater risk is that you don't believe in anything and your employees watch what you do. After the Parkland shooting, you know, what's your feeling about guns? I want a safe neighborhood. I want safe kids, safe schools for our employees' kids to go to school in, my own kids. And I want it to be a safe place. So that's a community question. Our community's got to come together and ensure the safety of our young people. If we don't, who will?
Yeah, and so this idea of taking a stand for what you believe in as an organization is kind of core to what I'm going to talk about. One of the coolest things that, one of the coolest conversations been involved in the last year was with the chief procurement officer of SAP, the global software company from Germany. She controls 6 billion euros of spend, and she started to refer to herself not as the chief procurement officer, but as the chief purpose officer. Every time an organization purchases something, you're voting for the kind of world that you want to see, and your purpose and your values are expressed in how you spend your dollars. And that's basically the idea of social purpose. And you know, one of the great ideas that we've really started to try to work on inside of our organization is the intersection of what the world needs and why Chandos exists, and how our business model can benefit society. We did some work with Afdel Aziz. Afdel Aziz is probably the world's leading expert in purpose marketing, and works with leading brands around the world, certainly in the area of expressing their purpose and identifying how they can impact the world and society positively. And so I'll just step through really quickly. Before I do this, I should provide some context. So Chandos is a national technical builder that's leading change in the Canadian construction industry. We have offices in Vancouver, Kelowna, Calgary, Red Deer, Edmonton, Toronto, and Ottawa. Sales approaching 800 million, 500 employees, and we specialize in complex projects. So that's where the technical builder part comes in. Our purpose as an organization is we exist to build a better world. And our vision is to be the most collaborative and innovative builder in North America by 2030. Just as an aside, there is a conversation around, well, should it be North America? Should it be Canada? Are we signaling a desire to go to the United States if we choose the word North America? And it's very aspirational. There are some contractors in the United States that, frankly, in my view, blow the doors off of Canadian contractors in terms of the collaboration and innovation. And we aspire to be in the same category as those builders. In terms of the missions of the organizations, a lot of companies would frame their missions from an outward standpoint, from an inward standpoint. We're focused on civil or industrial or this or that or the other thing. We took a view of focusing it outward. So we have a company mission. So we are a 100% employee-owned, B-Corp certified national technical builder that balances people and profit. We have a single class of voting shares and are the only contractor of any size that provides ownership to carpenters and laborers out in the sites. And the interesting part around our ownership model is that less than 40% of the ownership of this company is concentrated in the executives. The majority of the ownership lies with the frontline people doing the work, and that really drives our culture. We have an industry mission around moving industry towards collaboration, largely by championing integrated approach to project delivery, and a community mission around advocating for and promoting community benefit agreements as well as social procurement. And then lastly, a mission around the planet. So since the early 2000s, we've recycled construction waste on every project, and since then have diverted north of 80% of our entire supply chain from landfills. And we did that of our own accord without being told to do that by government or by policy. And it's been a great differentiator for us over the years. 4 values. It all starts with inclusivity. That drives collaboration. That drives innovation. And the cycle repeats itself. And really, we're a different kind of construction company. And I think the best way to kind of express this is our B-Corp certification. So we're the largest contractor in the world that's B-Corp certified. Our score is 107.4, and we actually have aspirations and a goal of moving that into the 145 range. That would be nipping on the heels of Patagonia. And we see a very solid path towards doing that. And part of why we're B Corp certified is that it's a third-party verification, an authentic verification that we walk our talk when it comes to using business as a force for good. One of the other things that we've done is we've joined with B Corps around the world with a commitment to be net zero. The movement's commitment is net zero by 2030. Our commitment is to be net zero by 2025. and we've got a solid plan around that. From what I can tell, we are one of the few contractors in the world who've actually calculated their greenhouse gas footprint and have put together a plan around how to drive that to zero. As I mentioned earlier, we've made a commitment with SAP that 5% of our addressable spend across the entire company be spent with impact organizations and social enterprises. And 5%, in my view, is actually a fairly low goal. We want to start there, and we see that commitment increasing over time as the supply chain matures. One of the things that we do as an organization, back to what Bill George was talking about, is we advocate very publicly for positions and on issues. And so here's a series of photos from a cross-country tour that we did in 2019, and we did this with Afdel Aziz and Craig Kielberger, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver. About 3,000 people across Canada attended, and it was a national conversation around purpose-driven organizations in the construction and industrial space and how we can use the might of our supply chain to do good in society. And we take a stand through this sort of an approach. And it's amazing to me the number of people who come up to me after these events from the audience, and they shake our hands and they say, we want to do business with you. So we advocate for these positions, and at the same time, we win work like crazy as a result of taking a stand on these sorts of issues. I was involved quite heavily in Bill C-344, and I'm sure most folks on the call are aware of it, so I won't get too deep into the details. So I worked with Senator Overmar and also with David LePage from Bisocial Canada. And essentially the bill was around measuring the impact of infrastructure dollars, how the positive impact that they have on Canadian society. The Conservatives lobbied against it and used procedural techniques, and it stalled in the Senate. So the bill died on the order paper. But the minister in charge said we're doing it anyways, and used a ministerial directive to push it forward. And so from that point in time, there's been many organizations across Canada who have developed social procurement policies. And I think that's a great thing for the industry. So I'm not going to read off all these logos on the screen here, but it gives you a sense. City of Toronto, City of Vancouver, Simon Fraser, BC Housing, there are many of them. And even in the prairies, municipality of Wood Buffalo, City of Edmonton is launching a social procurement initiative starting this coming year. City of Calgary has a test project. The list goes on. And I think it's great for the Canadian industry. Now, part of why I was involved in this conversation is that the industry almost unilaterally stood up against it and said it's a bad idea. So they said, we don't have a problem with diversity. They said, we don't want to pay for playgrounds. And frankly, that's some ignorance talking there. This narrative around a couple of well-intentioned municipalities, in my view, implementing a CBA in an incorrect approach, that has been pounced upon by many, and they point at that as a reason that social procurement doesn't work. Well, to them, I would say they don't really understand how it should work, and I hope to walk through that a little bit more here. They also say it costs the taxpayer more, and we have direct experience that that's nonsense, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. And this was the worst thing that I heard through the adventure here is they said, how dare you force us to hire labor from an inferior labor pool? They actually used those words in writing. That's them saying, how dare you force us to hire Indigenous folks, new Canadians, women in the trades, LGBTQ. The argument being that those folks are not as productive as traditional folks that they would hire in the role. And frankly, that narrative, in my view, is one of the most racist things I've heard in a long time. And they also say construction gives a lot of money to charity. And it's true. On a per GDP basis, I think the construction industry is near the top in terms of charitable giving. And I think that's great. But it's also part of the problem. And so this is Michael Porter. So Michael Porter is the modern grandfather of strategic thinking. He's a Harvard business professor, famous for the 5 forces model, among other things. And in 2007, he started to talk about the idea of shared value and the idea of businesses using the force of their organization to solve some of the biggest social challenges in the world. The traditional thinking, Milton Friedman's thinking, is that businesses and corporations exist to make a profit. And at the end of the year, you make a profit. And if you have some extra money laying around, you stroke a check and you give it to charity and you feel good about it. Porter challenges that idea and said, what if the business model could be adopted so that the actual business model in and of itself addresses some of the biggest societal problems and you still make a profit? And when you do that, you can scale infinitely. That's a very powerful idea, and it's underpinned a lot of the most recent thinking in terms of strategy and differentiation. So in 2007, Michael Porter started to talk about this. So a lot of folks will recognize the brand And One, but And One was a shoe company in the United States, arguably the first socially responsible brand. And the B-Corp movement came out of And One. So three friends in university together started this company. And they got an offer to sell it to a private equity group. And they went into that transaction with eyes wide open. And they figured that they had the T's crossed, the I's dotted. They wanted to preserve, the local supply chain, what they were doing in the local community, their employment policies, the wage policies that they had with their workforce. But they sold the company. And while they thought they had that preserved, it wasn't very long until the manufacturing was offshored to China, that the progressive policies around employment were gutted in the organization. And frankly, they felt a remorse for letting that happen to the company. And they said to themselves, what are we going to do? And they started the B-Corp movement. And so the B Labs was founded in about 2008 or 9. The first B-Corp certified projects were registered around that sort of time. And that movement of B-Corp certification and having a third party verify that you actually walk the talk from a corporate social responsibility standpoint was born out of their personal experience in terms of people saying they did great things, but in reality were not doing great things. This is Larry Fink. A lot of folks will know Larry Fink. So he's the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest institutional investor. I think he's got something like $8 trillion under management right now. And he's famous for, in 2017, he writes an annual letter to the CEOs of the organizations that he invests in. And in 2017, the title of his letter was A Sense of Purpose. And it called for business leaders to imbue a sense of purpose in the corporations that they lead. And the following year, in 2018, the title of the letter was Purpose and Profits. And he drew a line between purpose-driven organizations who do good for society and have some social good embedded in their business model. He drew a bright red line between those organizations and profitability, and has recently gone so far as to say, if you do not have a social purpose in your organization, we will drop you as an investor. And so when someone like that starts to make those sorts of noises, Bay Street and Wall Street sit straight up. And then in 2019, this is the Business Roundtable. Jamie Dimon's is in the middle there, and that's the 200 of the largest publicly traded companies in the U.S. coming together and challenging Friedman's view of shareholder supremacy and saying it's not just about creating a profit for the shareholders of the company; it's about doing good for society as well. So I think all of these things are transformative in the business world, and they're good for society. Peter Diamandis is the founder of Singularity University, and he's famous for saying, and this came out of Porter's thinking, the world's greatest social problems are the world's greatest business opportunities. And so I'm going to talk about one of the best examples that I know of for this. And so this is Adidas's Parley for the Oceans partnership. And a few years ago, Parley for the Ocean was an NGO that was literally using an old tugboat and some fishing nets and fishing plastic out of the Pacific Ocean and recycling it. And Adidas said, well, what if we could scale that up and partner with them? And what if we go fish the plastic out of the ocean and figure out how to turn the plastic into shoes? And so you see the white soles of these shoes here. Though each pair of these shoes has 11 bottles fished out of the ocean that are used to manufacture the soles. So they developed that. And they had a relatively conservative goal of selling 500,000 pairs of shoes or something like that. And they blew past that entirely. And I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but as of a year ago, they had sold north of 20 million pairs of these shoes at $200 or $300 US a pair. And so that's $4 or $5 billion of incremental revenue to the P&L of Adidas. And over that period of time, they've adapted and revised their technology so that they can not only just make the soles of the shoes out of recycled plastic, they can spin fabric out of them. And so you can buy jerseys today that are spun from plastic, fished out of the ocean. The jerseys they wear in FIFA are those jerseys. And then they've gone so far as to create a circular economy shoe. And it's going to launch here in 2021, about May of 2021. And that's a super cool product. It's still made from recycled plastic from the ocean, but the entire shoe, including the laces, is made out of it. And it's about $500 or $600 American, I'm told it will retail for. You buy it, it shows up in a bag. You wear your shoes. When they're worn out, you put it back in the bag, goes back to Adidas. They grind it down and they make a new shoe out of it. So it's a circular economy kind of way of being. I've got a short little video here. Check it out.
If we can see things for what they are, if we can see what they could be, if the plastic we use, we never throw away, if the end of one thing could be the beginning of the next. If we know that less can create more. If we can return, we reciprocate, we regenerate. If we are here for others, if we can work as a team, all we have to do is connect, and the world opens up. The future is about giving back.
Cool thing there is that their little test project with Parley has vaulted them into being, I believe it's the largest recycler of plastics, ocean plastic in the world. And they're putting billions and billions and billions of incremental dollars to the P&L of the organization. That's a great example of Porter's using business as a force for good and using existing supply chain as a force for good. So I'm going to kind of draw a parallel in the construction industry. And so this is a picture of the First Nations Technical Institute project that we're doing at Tyendinaga Mohawk territory in Deseronto, Ontario. It's a net zero building, mass timber. We were recently awarded the project. It's being delivered using a delivery method called integrated project delivery. And on this particular project, due to the delivery method, we've set a goal of at least 50% of the economic participation on the project will be from the local Indigenous community. And there are a lot of folks that talk about Indigenous economic reconciliation. And in many instances, it is just superficial. And so we've set a goal of really raising the bar on that. And, you know, that's a form of social procurement. There's no CBA on this project. There's no requirement to do this. Of course, our client wants us to do as much as we can here. And we've just taken it upon ourselves to actually do it and do it at a level that's never been seen before for this kind of a project in the construction industry. It's early days and we're excited about the possibilities on it. A project that's a little further along and much more tangible in terms of outcomes already is this is First and Clark in Vancouver. So 3 owners came together, City of Vancouver, Vancouver Coastal Health, and BC Housing. They put an RFP on the street for construction management. They signaled an intention and an interest to do integrated project delivery. We responded to it, and we won the project. Now, in the city of Vancouver, their CBA policy really only kicks in over a gross square footage of 475,000 square feet in the building. So we won this project, and it's a couple 100,000 square feet. So it's well below the CBA policy threshold. We said to the client, we think that we can meet the CBA policy requirements for the city of Vancouver. And we want to do it on this project, even though you never asked us to. We think it's good for society. We think it's the right thing to do. And we think we can demonstrate that we can do this at zero premium capital cost. So of course that client was very happy to work with us on that. And we are 95% certain that we can meet the CBA policy at zero premium capital cost. To the extent that we've engaged Simon Fraser University, the client has engaged Simon Fraser University and UBC to study the project and study what we're doing on the project, to kind of codify it and have third-party verification that we are in fact meeting the CBA policy at zero premium capital cost. That research study will be published and will be released to government owners across Canada, and actually owners in general, frankly, as a direct response to the industry's view that CBAs cost more and that social procurement costs more. When you get down into it, our partnership with Embers is one of the social enterprises we're working with there. We can hire a laborer through Embers for $24 an hour or something like that with burden, or we can do it ourselves. And it's pretty much the same cost. And so why wouldn't we hire labor through a social enterprise like Embers? We'll have the ability to produce an audited report at the end of the project that proves that there was no premium cost of doing social procurement on the project. And in addition to that, part of the research piece will directly address this question of labor sourced through social enterprises is not as productive of those who aren't. And we know from our own data set that that's complete nonsense. Back to my comment about that being a pretty racist comment, we'll have cold hard data on that we'll be able to share with the industry as a result of this project. One other thing that we've learned, and as soon as you start to do research to say, well, on this project, these were the outcomes, it walks you into a conversation about how you do it. And so the outcomes for our First and Clark project in BC can be X, but if a different contractor on a different project does it a different way and doesn't follow the same process, they could very well have a different outcome. So one of the things that we're doing to help advance this in the Canadian construction industry is we partnered with Bisocial Canada to develop a guide to how to do this. And we've actually broken that guide down by the four main delivery methods in the Canadian construction industry: integrated project delivery, construction management, design bid build, and design build or P3. I actually have the final draft of the guide on my desk. We expect that Bisocial will release it to the Canadian industry early next year. And we're really excited about it. There'll be an opportunity for organizations across Canada to put their logo on the inside front cover of the guide and stand behind the content of it. And then we can use that in conversations with government owners and private owners across Canada. So here's a picture of how this kind of really comes together. So I'm going to play last brief video here. This is our Norquest College project in Edmonton. $44 million complicated renovation to a post-secondary. And the guys in the red vests are Red Seal carpenters who work for Chandos, long-term employees. And then the folks in the yellow vests are Indigenous apprentices. And we partnered with the Alberta Indigenous Construction Career Center and hired numerous folks on the project. And I'm just going to quickly play this video, and then I'll wrap up here shortly.
For carpentry, I've been with the company for roughly just over 10 months now.
And my overall goal, so right now I'm continuing with my apprenticeship to get my Red Seal, which is a 4-year program, and then I'm wanting to get into eventually project management.
It's my first year apprenticeship for carpentry. I've been with the company for roughly just over 10 months now.
And my overall goal after I become a journeywoman is to go back and mentor the children, the youth, and women or anyone in the reserve who would like to learn more about carpentry.
We provide training to employment services for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We offer resume development, job search, personal one-on-one counseling.
I went there to get some safety tickets renewed, and I also got referred to Chandos. So I went in for an interview and then I was hired with Chandos, and ever since I've been loving my job here at Northwest.
It's not just about being a good corporate citizen. There is an ROI in this. It does make the organization better. Organizations like ourselves should just give people a chance and give them the opportunity in which they can grow and develop. And really, that's what it's about.
Anytime you can help a younger person along in their career, it is quite exciting in my books. I love to teach and I love to mentor. The program that is giving us a greater opportunity to do that with some of the Indigenous staff.
We're going into our 4th year of operating the center, and we've served over 3,700 clients.
So the way we think of how we can have impact in the construction industry is, as an example, our First and Clark project in Vancouver. On that project, we've made a commitment that 10% of the contract amount, it's an $86 million job, so $8.6 million will be spent with local social enterprises. And one of the best ways we have of doing that is by partnering with organizations. And in Winnipeg, there's great organizations such as Build. And in Vancouver, what we did is we partnered with Embers. And the basic deal is that they provide labor at the beginning and we bring them onto our payroll full time. And here's how we think about that. We can hire anyone to push a broom on our job sites across Canada. Let's hire the at-risk youth who's riding the bus 2 hours, 3 hours a day back and forth to high school, working 2 part-time minimum wage jobs, trying to put food on the table for a brother or a sister because mom and dad aren't around. Let's hire that kid. And when we do that, we get a very happy and engaged workforce. Those folks come to the job site with a big smile on their face. And we put them in our apprenticeship program. And most large general contractors in Canada pay for their folks to go through a trades training program. We pay for our folks to go through the apprenticeship program, 4-year program. Apprentice carpenters are making mid $20 an hour kind of work, and Red Seal carpenters are well north of $30 an hour. And it costs us nothing to do that. We were going to hire those people anyways. And when we do that as a contractor, we're reducing the strain on the Canadian social system. And when governments take that into account, that's part of the bigger picture of, selecting a contractor that does good for society. And so for us, we get a highly engaged, motivated workforce. And by us being early, I guess, first movers in the social procurement space and really embracing it, we've won probably in the last 12 months, 100 million of work that we probably would not have won otherwise. And it drives our performance because with that winning of 100 million of work comes an expectation that we continue to do the good work that we've already been doing in terms of social procurement. And so, these folks on this picture were hired a couple of years ago. And just a few weeks ago, this is an all-woman concrete placing crew or concrete formwork crew that we have out in Alberta. And the happiness and joy that these folks have working with us day and day and day, in many instances, some of them were going to be on the street. And in some instances, they were unsure if they were good enough to be Red Seal carpenters. And we worked with them and we said, yes, you can. And we're going to put you through the apprenticeship program. And we're building this very loyal and engaged workforce as a result of our engagement and our leadership in social procurement. So I'll leave you with this thought, if you could change a life for the better, would you do it? And I think that's the core conversation around social procurement. Thanks a lot for having me today.
Great. I have one. So now we're going to open up to questions. I have one question in the chat already, so feel free to do that. I think there might have been a little bit of a browser issue for some attendees, so we will be sharing this for sure, following up with anyone who did sign up for the session too, and anyone who's currently attending. If you need to think about some questions and send it back our way, I'd be happy to get you some answers afterwards. I'm just gonna switch back to this. I'll just say thank you all for being here. There's my information. So there's one question from our CEO, Sadir. He was wondering if you've ever done any work, or has Chandos done any work with Women Building Futures out of Edmonton?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with them. And in fact, one of the folks in the video, Chantel, not only came to us through the Alberta Indigenous Construction Career Center, but also through Women Building Futures. I may as well give a kind of a shout out to the groups that we work with. So in Vancouver, I mentioned Embers. Blade Runners is another big one in Vancouver. The Squamish Nation. In Edmonton, there's the Alberta Indigenous Construction Career Center. In Calgary, it's Momentum. Jeff Loomis is the CEO there. Women Building Futures is all of Alberta, great organization. In Winnipeg, we've never done work with Build, but Build's in Winnipeg, and frankly, Build's business model is the brainchild, and many social enterprises across Canada are modeled after Build in Winnipeg. So there's a great resource there for sure. And then in Toronto, Mark Soberano and Building Up is a group that we've been doing some work with. Community Builders in Barrie. And that ecosystem continues to grow and develop. When we started this, we were unsure if the social enterprises could respond fast enough to the demand as it came. And we've seen them able to do that no problem. So we've got no concerns about their ability to respond.
I see another statement, proof of your proof of purpose marketing, I guess. We do have the Office to Advance Women Apprentices in Manitoba, and I can connect you with the attendee there. And there's offices across the country, and they want to work with you. So there you go.
Great.
I did have a follow-up question. I think there's a good mix of kind of contractors on the attendees call, but also people from the social enterprise sector. And because, we know Build's a leader, but because we don't have the contractors, at least in place right now, who are anywhere near close to doing the type of commitment that you guys are doing. What do you think kind of the strongest elevator pitch to kind of cut through all of those?
So if you're a general contractor in Winnipeg and you're like, what's up with the social procurement stuff? Go see Sean Hogan at Build, have a conversation, start to understand what the social enterprises can do for you. My observation is that there's a lot of ignorance in the construction industry. There's a sense that it's one thing, and when you have a conversation about it, it's something completely different. I can tell you that I've had hundreds of conversations with trade contractors and our competitors as generals. And when I talk about the business case, I've never had anyone say anything other than it makes sense. And it generally comes down to winning the war for talent and finding great, motivated, happy, inspired people to work in the organization. And that's where the ROI really lies.
Great. I think this might be our last question. So it's obvious that Chandos got in early into this space. So, how formidable do you see your head start lead, and what, I guess, is there any barriers that contractors are going to have getting into this space?
Yeah, I would, I'm of two minds there. So I like being way out in front of it because it's clear to me that all levels of government across Canada wants this. I literally get a phone call from some owner on a weekly basis saying, how do I do social procurement? Because, many in industry are poo-pooing it, but I really want to do it. So can you give me some help? I like those phone calls. But I would say that there's not really much in the way of barriers to entry. So the working relationship that we have with Embers in Vancouver, we call up Marcia and the crew over there and say, send us 20 laborers. in 2 weeks, and they send us 20 laborers, and they take care of transportation and PPE and those sorts of things. And we've got to deal with them that after 3 months of employment, we get to handpick folks and bring them onto our payroll full time and give them ownership in the company, and they just keep that going. It's as simple as that. There are organizations that exist to help you do that. And I think there's just a lot of ignorance in the construction industry about understanding what's already out there that they can plug into.
For sure. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. That was some good questions and some good answers. I don't have anything else for anybody today. And yeah, I think we'll wrap up, and you guys can expect an email following up on this. And please feel free to share this conversation and this information with any general contractors, You know
what I would say? If there's anyone on this call that wants me to talk to other generals, I will talk to them. I know John Boxtel and the crew at Boxtel Construction in Winnipeg, and I've had good conversations with them. I'm happy to talk to anyone about the business case for this.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again, Tim. We really appreciate it. And I'll just sign off here and hope everyone has a good day.
See ya.